The cruel billionaire who tried to win a simple woman's attention and failed miserably in a world where wealth often dictates power, and power too easily morphs into cruelty. One man's name loomed larger than skyscrapers, Nicholas Grimaldi. A ruthless billionaire with a penchant for acquiring anything and anyone he desired, Nicholas treated the globe like his personal chessboard. Yet in the vibrant city of Miami, where extravagant galas and beachfront mansions glittered with privilege, there lived a humble woman named Haley Parker. She cared little for status and had a heart that radiated kindness as naturally as the sun. This is the story of how Nicholas set his sights on Haley, determined to claim her, and how he failed spectacularly. Nicholas Grimaldi was born into a working-class family in the outskirts of Milan. However, his early life was far from a fairy tale. His father, Pietro Grimaldi, was a mechanic in a small garage, scraping together every euro to send his brilliant son to the best schools. His mother, Sophia, was a seamstress who dreamed of seeing her only child break free from the chains of financial hardship. The brilliance was there from day one. Nicholas had an uncanny ability to dissect any situation to see every angle. By the time he was 18, he had obtained a scholarship to study economics at Bocconi University. By 20, he was coding rudimentary trading algorithms for an up-and-coming investment firm in Milan. By 25, he'd made his first million. The unstoppable climb continued as he relocated to London, then New York, and finally Miami, where he established the Grimaldi International Holdings. With interests in high-tech real estate and even film production, Nicholas had the money to buy anything he wanted. He owned a glittering penthouse atop one of Miami's tallest luxury towers, a veritable palace in the sky with sweeping views of the Atlantic. Yet somewhere along the way, the boy who once carried big dreams and bright hope became hardened. Meeting countless opportunists eager to use him for their gain, Nicolas learned early on that vulnerability was a liability. Love, in particular, he deemed a fool's paradise. After a short-lived tempestuous marriage to a French heiress named Élodie Lemaire ended in a very public scandal, Nicholas vowed never to trust anyone fully again. He transformed his heartbreak into an icy demeanor, preserving for himself a fortress of wealth and control. Miami's social scene quickly adapted to Nicholas's presence. He was invited to every high society gala, from charity dinners at the Perez Art Museum to exclusive soirees in Palm Island's multi-million-dollar mansions. At one such event, an art exhibition benefiting the Global Children's Foundation, organized by real-life philanthropist Eva Longoria, Nicholas silently appraised the guests. He was used to women flocking towards him, their eyes glittering with expectation, and men scrambling to invest in his funds. From the outside, it might have seemed enviable to command such attention, but Nicholas viewed it as a tiresome performance. Where others saw glamour, he saw the hollowness of contrived small talk and a game of social climbing. Amid this sparkle of social engagements, Nicholas developed a close-knit circle of confidants, each integral in fueling the empire. There was Matteo Rossi, his childhood friend, and now chief legal advisor, Ingrid Leclerc, a financial prodigy from Switzerland, and Genevieve Collins, the director of philanthropy at Grimaldi International. Together, they made Nicholas an unstoppable force, feared as much as admired. Despite his outward cynicism, Nicholas recognized the value of a respectable reputation. He regularly donated to philanthropic causes, such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's global health initiatives. He would appear on stage beside Bill Gates and Warren Buffett at the Giving Pledge galas. But behind closed doors, these charitable endeavors were meticulously calculated, a means to build clout, ensure strategic alliances, and glean lucrative insider information about business expansions. For Nicholas, compassion had become transactional, something to be leveraged. Little did he know that his world of meticulously orchestrated transactions was about to be upended by the simplest of complications, a kind-hearted woman who lived by entirely different rules. Haley Parker was a name he'd never heard until one fateful afternoon in a downtown cafe. In an age when every glance could spawn a virile rumor, their initial meeting was innocently unremarkable. Yet that moment planted a seed in Nicholas's mind, a seed that would sprout into an obsession and ultimately a lesson in humility he never anticipated. Haley Parker was the youngest of 3 daughters born to Samuel and Linda Parker, both grade school teachers in Madison, Wisconsin. Growing up, Haley learned to appreciate the small joys in life. Her parents instilled in her a belief in kindness, community, and simple living. College brought her to Florida, where she discovered a passion for marine biology. She subsequently landed a modest research position at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science. It didn't pay much, but it allowed her to work daily with dolphins, sea turtles, and coral reef conservation pursuits she found far more fulfilling than any high-paid corporate job. Haley believed that life should be about connections both with people and with the natural world. She lived in a humble apartment in Little Havana, painting watercolors in her free time and volunteering at a local animal shelter on weekends. She had a tight circle of friends who adored her, though most had trouble keeping up with her unstoppable optimism. While her sisters had married and settled in the Midwest, Haley remained single, not out of cynicism, but out of a desire to find a love that genuinely resonated with her values. Haley first met Nicholas by pure happenstance. One sweltering Miami afternoon, she ducked into Café Versailles on Calle Ocho to escape the heat and grab a refreshing mango smoothie. She chose a small table in the corner near the window. Usually she might have been lost in her own thoughts or reading a dog-eared paperback. But that day, she noticed a man across the cafe who seemed lost in his phone brow, furrowed and posture tense. A young barista, presumably new, approached the man's table. The barista was visibly flustered, balancing 2 trays of coffee pastries and a large iced latte. One misstep sent the iced latte tumbling onto the man's expensive navy suit. Gasps rippled through the cafe. Haley's eyes landed on the victim, whose expression darkened, radiating quiet fury. She had seen that look before, a look of someone accustomed to deference and quick to lash out when inconvenienced. In an instant, Nicholas threw back his chair, an expletive on his lips, ready to unleash his anger at the trembling barista. But before the heated tirade began, Haley stood and offered him a wad of napkins. Her voice was calm, laced with genuine concern. "Here, this might help. Please don't be too upset. It was just an accident." Nicholas snapped his gaze to her annoyance flaring. As he looked into her earnest brown eyes, something in him paused. Accustomed to sycophants or condescending onlookers, he was taken aback by the sincerity in her voice. She wasn't scolding him, nor was she trying to ingratiate herself with the city's most powerful man. She was simply diffusing a tense moment with a small act of kindness. He cleared his throat, straightened his shoulders, and muttered thanks. The barista face flushed, began apologizing profusely. Nicholas, still seething, tried to compose himself. "You should be more careful," he said, forcing an even tone. "Everyone has off days," Haley added softly, as if the observation were meant to help Nicholas remember his own humanity. The barista looked at her with grateful relief. Nicholas's curiosity was piqued. Once he had paid for his coffee, minus the spilled latte, and left a curt instruction for the barista not to fret over the cleaning bill. He turned to glance at Haley again. She was back at her table, quietly sipping her mango smoothie, flipping through a small notebook, where she sketched a half-finished drawing of a seahorse. Rather than approach her directly, Nicholas slipped out of the cafe, trying to shake off the odd sense of vulnerability. He rarely let anyone pierce his carefully maintained shield of aloof detachment, especially not a stranger. Back at his penthouse, Nicholas found his mind repeatedly drifting back to the cafe encounter. He recalled her gentle admonition. Everyone has off days, as if it were an echo in his ear. Rationally, he couldn't explain why it bothered him. Perhaps it was the novelty of being spoken to so plainly without deference or fear. Or maybe it was the memory of genuine concern in her eyes. He knew nothing about her except that she was the kind of person who rushed to help a clumsy barista instead of ridiculing them. In Nicholas's world, everyone either wanted something from him or feared his wrath if they stepped out of line. Haley Parker, he had caught her name when the barista apologized, appeared to fit in neither category. He promptly tasked Matteo Rossi to find out everything about her. Matteo, who was accustomed to such personal inquiries, merely raised a brow in curiosity, but complied. A simple life, a modest job, no major social connections. Matteo's research soon revealed Haley Parker to be unremarkable in all the conventional ways that Nicholas had learned to measure people. Perhaps that was precisely what made her so compelling to him. For once he had encountered someone who wasn't consumed by wealth or status, and so Nicholas Grimaldi set his sights on her, confident that if he decided to pursue this gentlewoman's attention, he would succeed. After all, had he ever lost in the arena of desire, Nicholas wasted no time orchestrating a chance second meeting. With Matteo's intel, he knew Haley's schedule almost down to the hour. He discovered that she often worked late at the university lab and frequented a nearby bookstore, Books and Books in Coral Gables, especially on Wednesday evenings for their weekly author readings. That Wednesday, Nicholas decided to appear at Books and Books himself. It was a far cry from the sleek, exclusive bars and clubs he usually frequented, instead of jazz music or the clink of crystal champagne flutes. There were hushed conversations, the faint aroma of roasted coffee beans from the attached cafe, and the musty scent of paperback pages. He was out of his element and felt uncharacteristically exposed. Dressed in a designer casual ensemble, tailored charcoal slacks, and a crisp white shirt, Nicholas scanned the shop. Wooden shelves rose from floor to ceiling, creating winding pathways of literature. And there in the travel section, he spotted Haley flipping through a guidebook on the Galapagos Islands. He could have approached her instantly, but he found himself hesitating. What if the jaded cynic in him misread the situation? What if she recognized him? Billionaire tabloids, rumors and all, and reacted like every other person he'd ever met with contrived politeness or star-struck curiosity. At last, he mustered his confidence and took a few steps forward. "That's a great place for marine life," he said, nodding toward the guidebook. Haley turned, and the immediate smile that blossomed across her face was warm open. She clearly recognized him from the cafe, but her eyes didn't widen in recognition of his celebrity or wealth. She simply saw another human being, or so it seemed. "Oh, hello again. Small world." She gave a little laugh, shutting the guidebook. "I've always dreamt of visiting the Galapagos. The biodiversity is incredible. Are you interested in marine life too?" Nicholas almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. In truth, he barely spared a thought for fish unless they were on his dinner plate. But he wasn't about to admit that. Instead, he gave a diplomatic smile. "I do appreciate biodiversity," he replied, not entirely lying. He paused, noticing the faint ocean motifs on her watch strap. "You work with marine animals, right?" Haley nodded. "At the Rosenstiel School. And you, I never got your name." The question startled him. Nicholas was used to people recognizing him immediately. "I'm Nicholas," he said, omitting his last name. She extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Nicholas. I'm Haley." "But you know that already." She chuckled at the memory of the cafe incident. "I hope your suit wasn't ruined." He shrugged, an unaccustomed sense of awkwardness creeping over him. "Oh, it's just fabric. I survived." They chatted for a few minutes about the Galapagos coral reefs and the best spots in Miami to watch manatees feed. Nicholas was uncharacteristically reserved, choosing to listen more than he spoke. Her genuine enthusiasm for marine life shone through every word. There was a purity in her passion that he found both alien and captivating. Sensing the conversation might end unless he made the next move, Nicholas asked, "Would you like to grab a coffee in the cafe? I'd love to hear more about your work." His usual approach, direct, confident, had softened into a cautious invitation. Perhaps part of him was worried she might say no. Haley considered him for a moment. She noted his impeccable attire and the finely wrought watch on his wrist, both clues to a wealth that clashed with her own unpretentious life. But there was something oddly earnest in his request. "Sure," she said at last, "why not?" They settled at a small table in the cafe corner. While a local author read from her new novel on a makeshift stage, Haley and Nicholas sipped cappuccinos in hushed conversation. Haley spoke passionately of an upcoming research trip to the Florida Keys, where she and her team would study coral bleaching. Nicholas listened occasionally, nodding or asking a question to keep her talking. Not once did Haley ask him about his line of work, a jarring deviation from the norm. In fact, she seemed unaware or entirely uninterested in the idea that he might be the Nicholas Grimaldi of Miami tabloids and business news. Instead, she asked about his travels, his interests beyond day-to-day life. Nicholas found himself inventing half-truths. He told her he enjoyed traveling, though his trips were mostly for business, that he liked art, though he bought it as an investment, and that he found satisfaction in philanthropy, which in reality was a PR move. At the end of the night, Haley gave him her number scrawled on a small piece of bookstore receipt paper. The gesture was friendly, even casual. "In case you want to learn more about marine conservation," she teased with a warm grin. Nicholas stared at those numbers long after returning to his penthouse. It occurred to him that this was the first time in many years he'd actually sought a phone number rather than having it offered up by someone eager for his wealth or connections. He was fascinated by the simple earnestness of Haley Parker, and in the quiet of his penthouse with the city lights glittering below, Nicholas Grimaldi made a decision. He wanted her attention, her admiration, even her love, and he was prepared to deploy every resource in his arsenal to get it. Over the next few weeks, Nicholas courted Haley's friendship in his typical style, though he tried to adapt for her unpretentious nature. He texted to ask her about her day, about her research, sometimes forwarding articles he found on marine biology or climate change. Though these gestures were new to him, they were suspiciously methodical, each carefully chosen to pique Haley's interests. But for all his cunning, Nicholas found himself intrigued in unexpected ways. Haley was never too busy to help a friend in need, whether that meant dog-sitting for a neighbor or volunteering at the Marine Mammal Rescue Center. She found delight in the smallest pleasures, the color of the sky at dusk over Biscayne Bay, the softness of a cat's purr, the swirl of honey in her morning tea. If Nicholas forgot to respond to a text because of a grueling business meeting, She merely assumed he was busy and waited patiently. No follow-up demands, no anxiety about him losing interest. She was in every sense content in her life. At first, Nicholas thought it was an act. He'd encountered countless people who pretended to be above materialism just to stand out. Yet the more he observed her daily routine sometimes from the tinted windows of his chauffeured car, the more he realized she truly did live differently. She had no designer clothes, no expensive car. She owned a battered old Jeep Wrangler that was at least a decade out of style, which she used to haul rescue equipment for stranded dolphins. Her apartment was modest, decorated with her paintings and a few second-hand pieces of furniture. Even the instruments she used in her lab were ones she had fought to get funding for, rather than relying on any personal wealth or big grants. One Friday evening, Haley invited Nicholas to a fundraiser that she and her colleagues were hosting at a local community center. The goal was to raise money for rehabilitating a group of dolphins stranded by an oil spill off the Gulf Coast. Nicholas arrived expecting a glitzy event, akin to his usual philanthropic galas. Instead, he found a humble set-up paper lanterns hung from the rafters, a homemade buffet provided by volunteers, and a small stage for a local band. Children ran around giggling and playing tag under the watchful eyes of parents and volunteers. The entire event likely cost less than the price of one seat at the exclusive charity dinners Nicholas usually attended. Haley spotted him near the entrance, her face lit up with an unfeigned joy. "I'm so glad you could make it. Are you hungry? We have the best empanadas made by Mrs. Martinez. She runs a bakery nearby." Nicholas glanced at the makeshift buffet. Ordinarily, he'd have scorned the idea of munching on homemade empanadas under paper lanterns. Tonight, however, he found himself stepping forward with a tentative smile. "Sure," he said, taking a plate. They walked among the crowd, Haley introducing him as simply Nicholas, a friend. No one eyed him warily. No one whispered about his net worth. Parents asked him about his job, and he responded vaguely about being in international business. To his surprise, he experienced a sense of relief. Here he wasn't Nicholas Grimaldi, billionaire magnate. He was just a face among many, part of a communal effort to help animals in distress. Near the stage, Haley excitedly pointed out the silent auction. Local artists had donated paintings, sculptures, and handmade crafts. She showed him a piece she'd painted herself, a watercolor depicting a pod of dolphins swimming near a coral reef. Nicholas regarded the painting, noting the gentle brushstrokes and the luminous colors. A swirl of warmth surged inside him. In its simplicity, the painting was breathtakingly sincere, just like its creator. Compelled by a sudden urge to do something selfless, Nicholas discreetly wrote a substantial check to the fundraiser. He handed it to the event organizer, urging them not to announce his name. The older woman's eyes widened at the amount, and she whispered, "Bless you, sir. We can save so many animals with this." Haley, noticing the hushed exchange, approached. "What did you do?" He shrugged, hoping the flush on his cheeks wasn't obvious. "Just a small donation," he replied. Before she could inquire further, the band began to play, and Haley was pulled away by a group of children who wanted to show her their drawings of whales and sharks. Nicholas stood there, strangely content, watching Haley beam as the kids tugged on her arms. In that moment, a subtle sense of satisfaction washed over him, different from the pride he felt when sealing a multi-million-dollar deal. This was purer, tinged with humility. He realized that Haley, by merely existing as she was evoked in him, a desire to be better, not for the sake of image, but for the sake of goodness itself. Little did Nicholas know, however, that beneath the surface of their growing connection Storms were brewing. His arrogance, deeply rooted in his past successes, would soon rear its head. He had never truly relinquished the mindset that he could own anything or anyone if he just tried hard enough. And for all her sincerity, Haley was not a woman to be bought, nor would she remain blissfully unaware of the darker side of his empire for much longer. While Nicholas was learning to appreciate the warmth of Haley's world, his own empire continued to rumble with high-stakes deals and behind-the-scenes manipulations. He had left much of the day-to-day operations to Ingrid Leclerc, the Swiss financial genius who managed Grimaldi International's labyrinthine ventures. He still kept an eye on major acquisitions, especially a heated negotiation in South America over mining rights. Nicholas believed he could keep his personal interest in Haley separate from his business dealings, but real life rarely allows for such clean divisions. Rumors began circulating that Grimaldi International was using unethical methods to secure a contract in Chile. This involved outbidding local competitors, applying political pressure, and possibly overriding environmental regulations. The details were murky, but the allegations threatened to smear Nicholas's carefully curated philanthropic image. Matteo, always the cautious advisor, insisted that Nicholas immediately address the scandal. However, Nicholas, preoccupied with his budding relationship, assumed it was just another nuisance to be managed. Meanwhile, Haley, whose passion for conservation drove every aspect of her life, found herself embroiled in an unexpected controversy. A Brazilian non-profit she worked with, the Marinho Preservation Society, sent an urgent plea for help. Their local reefs were threatened by industrial runoff from a new construction site. Some quick digging revealed that the site belonged through a series of shell companies to Grimaldi International. Haley found out about this connection inadvertently. A friend at the non-profit recognized the name Nicholas from Haley's phone wallpaper. A discreet snapshot Haley had taken of him smiling with a manatee in the background at a rescue event. "Wait, that's Nicholas Grimaldi," the friend had exclaimed. The same Grimaldi behind the new seaport project in Brazil. At first, Haley dismissed it as a misunderstanding. How could the man who had quietly donated a huge sum to save dolphins be involved in something that harmed coral reefs in Brazil? Yet the more evidence she saw, public records, financial documents, local news articles, the more undeniable the link became. The heartbreak sank in like a heavy weight in her chest. Determined to get answers, Haley confronted Nicholas one evening at his penthouse. The place still took her breath away. The polished marble floors, the floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing a panoramic view of the city. But she forced herself to focus on the matter at hand. "I need to ask you something important," she began, her tone measured, but trembling slightly. "Are you aware of a construction project in Brazil that's harming the local reefs and displacing wildlife? And is it linked to Grimaldi International?" Nicholas felt a jolt of alarm but tried to maintain a cool exterior. "Haley, these are complicated matters. International construction deals third-party contractors. I don't handle all the details directly. We have teams for that." She held his gaze unblinking. "But you are Grimaldi International. Your name is on every deal. Whether you personally sign the documents or not, your company is responsible." He inhaled sharply. This was the confrontation he had hoped to avoid. "I can't keep track of every project in every country," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "But if something unethical is happening, I'll look into it and fix it." Haley's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "It's not just about being unethical. This is destroying habitats. People rely on those ecosystems, and marine life is suffering. This goes against everything I believe in." Nicholas reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Her reaction stung, but he pressed on. Haley, you have to understand in business there are always complexities. Environmental regulations differ. Local governments have their own agendas. We try to minimize impact, but it's not always so black and white. She shook her head, stepping back. It is black and white to me, Nicholas. You can't claim to care about saving dolphins in Florida, while your company ravages coral reefs in Brazil. Do you have any idea how contradictory that is? A taut silence fell between them, filled with a lifetime of conflicting values. Nicholas finally spoke, his voice tight. I don't do these things personally. My partners make decisions that sometimes skirt the lines, but that's how we remain competitive. If I didn't, someone else would jump in. It's just business. Haley pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, as though trying to ward off a headache. Do you hear yourself? It's just business. Destroying reefs, displacing entire species. This is real life, not a spreadsheet. How can you be so blind? Feeling cornered. Nicholas's old defense mechanisms flared. He retorted, You can't save the world by refusing to acknowledge reality. Money makes the world go round, Haley. You've lived in your idealistic bubble for too long. Her hurt, pained eyes turned distant. I never asked you to fix the entire world. I asked you to be consistent with the kindness you claim to care about. She paused, shoulders slumping in defeat. I need time to think about this. As she left the penthouse, the grand doors clicking shut behind her, Nicholas felt a rush of anger, shame, and regret. He prided himself on control, yet he was losing the one thing he had set his sights on with genuine emotion, Haley's admiration. In that moment, he realized that while he could manipulate markets, politicians, and entire industries, he couldn't manipulate Haley's conscience. And so began the first major fracture in their fragile bond. Nicholas stood by the expansive windows, gazing at the Miami skyline. The city's lights twinkled, indifferent to his turmoil. For the first time in years, Nicholas felt uncertain about his power, his ability to get what he wanted. He muttered to himself, maybe it's time to reevaluate. But old habits die hard, and reevaluation for Nicholas often meant doubling down on control. The question was whether that approach would push Haley closer or drive her away forever. Days turned into weeks without a word from Haley. Nicholas sent a flurry of messages, some apologetic, others defensive. She responded politely, but kept her distance, citing her busy schedule at the lab. In truth, she was grappling with her own heartbreak. She missed the charming side of Nicholas, but every thought of him now carried the sting of betrayal. Determined to recapture her affection, Nicholas decided on a grand gesture. Subtlety, he believed, had gotten him nowhere. He arranged a lavish display that only a billionaire could orchestrate. He rented out an entire section of Miami's aquarium for an evening complete with a private dolphin show and a custom reef exhibit. He planned to invite Haley, her colleagues, and a select group of marine biology students, hoping to demonstrate his willingness to support her passion for marine conservation on a grand scale. Genevieve Collins, head of philanthropy at Grimaldi International, helped coordinate the event. She was uneasy about the extravagance, knowing full well that Nicholas's money might be better spent directly funding research rather than a one-night spectacle. But she followed his orders, as she always did. Invitations were sent out, and the marine biology community buzzed with excitement about the exclusive night at the Seaquarium. When Haley arrived, it was at the urging of her close friend, Dr. Carmen Reyes, who reasoned that the event could benefit their program. Haley hesitated at the entrance, feeling a mix of wonder and discomfort. The seaquarium was bedecked in banners proclaiming, "Protect our oceans," and staff members were on standby to guide guests through interactive exhibits. Nicholas appeared by the main tank, wearing an expensive tailored suit, looking every bit the polished magnate. Haley, he greeted her softly, noticing the conflict in her eyes. "Thank you for coming." She forced a polite nod. "You put together quite an event. I hope it helps raise awareness and funds for marine life conservation." He smiled, gesturing for her to follow him. "Come see the new reef exhibit. We've partnered with experts to show how coral reef restoration works. It's one step toward making amends." She walked beside him cautiously, letting him lead the way. In the newly created exhibit area, large displays showcased the process of coral fragging and regrowth with interactive screens explaining the threats reefs faced. A handful of marine researchers, some of whom Haley recognized from conferences, stood nearby ready to educate the evening's guests. Haley was impressed. As far as events went, it was thorough and informative, but she also noted the corporate logos and banners that read, "Grimaldi International supports ocean conservation." Her heart sank at the possibility that this was simply a PR stunt designed to offset the growing controversy about his company's environmental damage in other parts of the world. Partway through the evening, Nicholas took the microphone. With the main dolphin tank as a backdrop, he addressed the crowd of marine scientists, students, and local activists. "I want to thank each and every one of you for coming tonight. Our oceans are vital for the future of humanity, and it's our responsibility, both individually and corporately, to protect them. This exhibit is just the beginning. Grimaldi International plans to invest in reef restoration projects along the Florida coast and around the globe." The audience broke into polite applause, but Haley remained reserved, arms crossed. Nicholas caught her eye and signaled for silence. "I also want to recognize a very special person," he said, voice echoing through the speakers. "Haley Parker. She embodies the spirit of marine conservation better than anyone I've ever met. Her passion and dedication have inspired me to rethink the way Grimaldi International approaches environmental issues. Haley, we are grateful for your work and your heart." All eyes turned to Haley, who felt her cheeks burning. She offered a half smile, but inside she wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part gratitude for the acknowledgement, part cynicism about his motives. The crowd applauded, and a few people murmured supportive words to her. After the speech, Nicholas stepped down from the platform and joined Haley near the side of the tank. He lowered his voice to a gentle murmur. "Was that enough to show you I'm serious about changing? I'm ready to do whatever it takes, Haley." She looked up at him, eyes clouded. "It's a beautiful event, Nicholas, truly. But real change isn't a one-night spectacle. And what about Brazil? Or the other projects that violate basic environmental standards?" He swallowed hard. "I'm looking into it. It's complicated, but I promise you I'll do everything I can to fix it. Just give me time." Haley glanced at the throng of attendees milling around, awestruck by the glitzy presentation. She, however, couldn't ignore the larger picture. "I don't want you to do this just to impress me. It has to come from a genuine place, or it means nothing." Nicholas's gaze darted away, uncertainty flickering across his features. It was a flicker not lost on Haley, who realized he might be more concerned about winning her approval than actually shifting his company's practices. The night continued with guests enjoying behind-the-scenes tours and photo ops with rescue manatees. Haley mingled politely, explaining coral biology and conservation strategies to curious visitors. Nicholas hovered, providing small philanthropic gestures, a promise to fund a research project, here a new aquarium facility there. Yet each time their eyes met, Haley's expression remained guarded. By the end of the evening, guests departed with smiles praising Nicholas's philanthropic spirit. Reporters took photographs capturing the billionaire's vow to protect marine life. Social media buzzed with images of Nicholas and Haley standing side by side near the dolphin tank. From the outside, it looked like a triumphant event. But once the crowd thinned, Haley turned to Nicholas. "I hope you stick to your word," she said, voice trembling with longing for something genuine. "Because if this was just another PR move, then I don't know what we have left." Nicholas gently cupped her cheek. "This isn't just about Per, I promise you that." She nodded, tears threatening to spill. "Then show me, Nicholas. Don't just tell me, show me. Make a real difference." With that, she left him standing by the edge of the tank alone amidst the echoes of excited chatter. In the stillness that followed, Nicholas grappled with an unfamiliar sensation, the desperation of trying to keep something genuine in a world he'd built on calculated moves and hollow spectacle. Behind the scenes, the controversies surrounding Grimaldi International had reached boiling point. Investigative journalists from major news outlets had started digging deeper into Nicholas's foreign ventures, discovering concerning ties to corrupt local officials and shell companies that shielded environmentally damaging practices. The headlines read, "Philanthropist or Hypocrite, the Dark Side of Grimaldi International's Global Deals." Matteo Rossi and Ingrid Leclerc worked frantically to contain the fallout. They pressured local lobbyists to spin the narrative, claiming that any detrimental activities were initiated by rogue contractors. But as more documents leaked, it became evident the directives originated much higher up in the chain of command. Caught in the crossfire was Haley. As a now semi-public figure linked to Nicholas by media coverage, she found her email inbox flooded with messages, some supportive, some accusatory. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from reporters hoping to get a personal take on Nicholas's empire. The situation tore at her. She remained resolute that she was not Nicholas's spokeswoman, yet she felt an obligation to demand accountability from him. Strained by both media attention and her own moral compass, Haley decided she needed space. She took a research assignment in the Florida Keys for a week, diving along coral nurseries to collect data on bleaching patterns. Immersed in the underwater world she cherished, she found solace among the reefs, letting the gentle sway of sea anemones and schools of fish calm her mind. Nicholas, however, was left in a maelstrom of corporate damage control. Each day brought new headlines, new angry phone calls from investors, threatening to divest if the controversies weren't quashed. He spent hours locked in conference rooms with Ingrid Matteo and other key executives, analyzing financial charts that showed their stock prices tumbling. Between crisis meetings, Nicholas tried calling Haley, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. His text messages to her remained unread. Powerless in a way he'd never been before, Nicholas oscillated between rage and regret. He lashed out at employees, demanded immediate resolutions, and considered drastic measures like selling off entire divisions or pinning the blame on scapegoats. It was during one of these tense sessions that Ingrid finally spoke bluntly. "Nicholas, you can't just wave a magic wand and fix everything. We're under investigation by multiple regulatory bodies. Our only hope is genuine cooperation and real changes to our operations." Nicholas glared at her eyes blazing. "And what if I don't want to bend to these bureaucrats? I can fight them in court. We have the best lawyers money can buy." Matteo, sitting across the table, rubbed his temples. "Even the best lawyers can't spin a story that's this damning. There's too much evidence. If you want to salvage your reputation and the company's viability, you need to show real reform, not a PR stunt, actual changes. Otherwise, we're looking at a long, drawn-out battle that you might not win. The billionaire clenched his fists. My entire empire was built on my terms. He seethed. I won't be dictated to by tabloids and activists. Is that empire worth losing? Haley over? Ingrid asked quietly. The question lingered, cutting through the tension like a razor. Nicholas stiffened, shoulders rigid. He stormed out of the conference room, ignoring the concerned stares of his staff. The question echoed in his mind. Was he truly willing to put the business above Haley? Above the fledgling sense of humanity she had awakened in him. Later that night, Nicholas sat alone in his opulent living room, the floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting the city lights onto the polished marble floors. A half-finished glass of scotch rested at his side. His gaze drifted to a photo of him and Haley from the Seaquarium event. She was smiling, but he noticed now that her eyes carried a hint of sadness. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. No answer. He left a voicemail voice slurred with exhaustion and despair. Haley, I miss you. I need you to know I'm trying to fix everything. For you. For us. Please call me back. Across the city. Haley listened to that voicemail hours later. She closed her eyes, wrestling with her feelings. She loved the potential she saw in him, the man who could be generous, caring, and kind. But she despised the corporate machine he had nurtured, the empire built on exploitation and questionable deals. Could he truly change, or was she chasing an impossible dream? The stage was set for a reckoning. Nicholas faced a pivotal choice: cling to his merciless drive for profit or risk, it all by dismantling the unethical pillars holding up his empire. Haley, too, faced a decision: stand by his side as he fought to reform or walk away to protect her own conscience. In the days that followed, Nicholas found an unlikely ally in Genevieve Collins. Though she had helped orchestrate many of his philanthropic efforts, she had grown disillusioned watching him compromise ethics for profit. Privately, Genevieve had always admired Haley's unwavering values. She approached Nicholas in his office, an austere space dominated by glass and steel. I've scheduled a meeting with representatives from Earthwatch Alliance, she announced. Earthwatch Alliance was a reputable environmental watchdog that had openly criticized Grimaldi International. They're willing to sit down and discuss a plan for real environmental reforms provided you're ready to make binding commitments. Nicholas exhaled slowly, staring out the window at Miami's sprawling skyline. Binding commitments, he repeated, his voice tinged with bitterness. How far-reaching are we talking? Far, Genevieve said, unflinching. You'd have to halt projects that violate environmental standards, pay restitution for damages, and adopt strict new guidelines internally monitored by third-party auditors. It won't be easy. Investors might flee. Profits will drop. But it's the only way to salvage your reputation and to show Haley you're serious. He turned, eyes flickering with inner conflict. I've built everything from the ground up. Surrendering control is not in my nature. Genevieve's gaze hardened. You can't have it both ways, Nicholas. You hired me to make your philanthropy genuine. Now I'm telling you the truth. If you don't do this, you lose everything that truly matters, including Haley. At the mention of Haley, Nicholas felt a pang in his chest. He recalled her gentle sizzle, the warmth of her presence. Was that worth sacrificing the relentless quest for profit that had defined his life? Reluctantly, he agreed to meet with Earthwatch Alliance. The meeting took place in a nondescript conference room in downtown Miami. Nicholas was accompanied by Ingrid Mateo and Genevieve. Across the table sat 5 representatives from Earthwatch, environmental lawyers, biologists, and activists, armed with evidence of wrongdoing. Tensions ran high as they laid out their demands: immediate cessation of environmentally harmful practices, a transparent auditing process, and a hefty financial commitment to restore damaged ecosystems worldwide. Nicholas remained stoic through most of it. His old instincts told him to negotiate to drive down their demands, but memories of Haley's tearful eyes and unwavering conviction softened his defenses. He finally sighed and said, "I'm willing to enter into a memorandum of understanding, assuming we can hammer out details that keep the company operational." The Earthwatch representatives glanced at each other with mild surprise. One of them, Dr. Louise Morgan, nodded cautiously. "It's a start," she said, "but understand we're done with half measures. We need genuine accountability." Nicholas's gaze flickered to Ingrid, then to Genevieve. Both women gave him subtle nods of encouragement. It was as though they were urging him to step onto the path of reform, or lose the very soul of what he'd built. By the end of that tense negotiation session, Nicholas signed a preliminary agreement to conduct an external audit of all Grimaldi International's projects and to cease operations in known ecologically fragile zones until further reviews were completed. His stomach churned. He knew this move would send shockwaves through his corporate world, but for once he let his heart guide him rather than his hunger for profit. That same night, he found himself in front of Haley's apartment. It was past 9 p.m., and the neighborhood was quiet. He hesitated before knocking, uncertain if she would even let him in. After a few moments, the door opened. Haley stood there in sweatpants, her hair loosely tied back, face etched with worry. "What are you doing here?" she asked, not unkindly. He looked down, feeling uncharacteristically humble. "I signed an agreement with Earthwatch Alliance today," he said quietly. "It's a big step. We're stopping projects that cause harm. Independent audits, real reforms." Haley's eyes widened. "You're serious?" That's incredible, Nicholas." He sighed, shoulders slumping under the weight of the day's battles. "I don't expect you to trust me overnight. But I'm trying. Because, He paused, struggling to articulate feelings he was unused to voicing. "Because you showed me something better than profit margins and power. You showed me what it means to actually care without strings." A tear slid down Haley's cheek, but she managed a soft smile. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me," he pleaded, voice cracking. "I need your help to see this through. Otherwise, I'm just going to fail again." Haley's emotions swelled. She saw sincerity in his eyes, the kind of unguarded vulnerability she never thought she'd witness from him. Carefully, she opened the door wider. "Come in," she whispered. They talked late into the night, an honest dialogue about what real changes would look like, how his business needed to evolve, and the moral responsibility that came with wielding so much power. Nicholas laid out his fears that the board might revolt, that investors would retaliate. But Haley reassured him that genuine reform was the path to a sustainable future, both financially and ethically. By the time he left, dawn was creeping into the sky. Though no formal promises were made regarding their relationship, there was a mutual understanding. If Nicholas continued down this new path, Haley would walk beside him. If he wavered, he'd lose her forever. Just when it seemed Nicholas might truly pivot toward ethical reform, another storm emerged, this time from within Grimaldi International. Unbeknownst to Nicholas, his longtime partner and COO Paolo Farnese had been covertly siphoning company funds and directing them into shadowy offshore accounts. Paolo had always been an ambitious man, riding Nicholas's coattails and absorbing his ruthless methods. Realizing that Nicholas's pivot toward ethical business was going to capsize their cutthroat, profit-at-all-costs approach. Paolo decided it was time to jump ship, preferably with as much wealth as possible. Ingrid Leclerc, ever vigilant, with the financial statements discovered inconsistencies. She immediately alerted Nicholas, who confronted Paolo in a tense, closed-door meeting on the top floor of the Grimaldi Tower. The conversation escalated into shouting with accusations flying like daggers. "You traitor!" Nicholas roared, slamming his fist on the gleaming conference table. "How dare you steal from me after everything I've built?" Paolo sneered. "Built? I was there every step of the way, covering up your dirty secrets, negotiating bribes and twisting arms. This sudden moral crusade, do you think it embraces me? You're throwing away what we worked for, all for some naive woman who thinks she can change you." Fury ignited in Nicholas's eyes. "Get out," he hissed. "I'll handle you with the full force of the law." Paolo laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Don't be so sure. I have enough dirt on you to bury you. You might have the press fooled, but I remember how we acquired those mines in Colombia, the under-the-table deals in Asia. I'm sure Earthwatch Alliance would love that information." Nicholas's jaw set rigidly, his fingers flexing as though itching to strike Paolo. Instead, he stepped aside. "You do what you have to, but I'm not playing your games anymore." He pressed the intercom and summoned security. Within minutes, Paolo was escorted off the premises, his company credentials revoked. But the threat he posed lingered like a toxin in the air. Nicholas turned to Ingrid, face pale. "He won't hesitate to leak everything if it means taking me down." She nodded, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "This won't be easy, Nicholas. If half of what Paolo threatens to expose is true, Earthwatch Alliance might walk away from our agreements. We could face criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions. Investors will flee." Nicholas closed his eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. "I can't go back to the old ways, Ingrid. That would mean losing Haley, losing myself. Let the truth come out if it must. I'll face the consequences." Over the coming days, Paolo made good on his threat. Anonymous leaks appeared in major publications, detailing hush-hush payments, environmental damage cover-ups, and suspicious relationships with government officials. Overnight, Grimaldi International's stock plummeted. Politicians who had once courted Nicholas's favor now distanced themselves, citing moral high ground. The philanthropic community, including Earthwatch Alliance, issued statements condemning the revelations. Amid the chaos, Nicholas found a strange sense of resolve. He filed lawsuits against Paolo for embezzlement, turning over internal documents to authorities to prove he was serious about full transparency. It was a risky move, one that exposed more of the company's dirty laundry to public scrutiny, but it sent a clear message. Nicholas Grimaldi was severing ties with his own ruthless past. Haley watched these developments with a mixture of hope and apprehension. She saw Nicholas on TV, facing a barrage of hostile reporters outside the courthouse. Though battered by questions, he remained composed, insisting he welcomed an independent investigation. Gone was the arrogant smirk she'd once known. In its place was a determined, if weary man. They met later that night at Haley's apartment. He looked exhausted, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "I've never felt so exposed," he confessed, sinking onto her worn couch. "Everything I've built could crumble." Haley sat beside him, placing a comforting hand over his. "Maybe it needs to crumble at least the parts that were rotten. Then you can rebuild something better." He stared at her, a flicker of gratitude in his gaze. "I don't deserve your support." She offered a small, sad smile. I'm not doing this for you alone, Nicholas. I'm doing it for the dolphins you helped save, the reefs you pledged to protect, and every person who wants to believe change is possible. If you're willing to keep fighting for what's right, then I'll be here. But one step backward, and I'm gone." Nicholas nodded, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. The man who had once believed vulnerability was weakness now discovered it could be a kind of salvation. The battle was far from over, but he felt a sense of renewed purpose and a fragile hope that perhaps redemption was still within reach. Over the next several months, the legal and financial ramifications of Paolo's leaks hit Grimaldi International like a Category 5 hurricane. Multiple government agencies worldwide initiated formal investigations. The company's stock prices sank to historic lows. Investors withdrew, severing ties in panic. In an emergency board meeting, Nicholas faced the unthinkable. The board of directors demanded he step down as CEO to restore confidence. They argued that while they appreciated his new ethical stance, the market had lost faith in his leadership. Ingrid and Genevieve tried to defend him, but the other board members insisted on a change in management, someone with a clean record, untainted by scandal. Nicholas sat at the head of a long table, the seat he had commanded for years. Now, in a stunning turn of events, he was outvoted. With his resignation mandatory, he found himself stripped of the power he'd wielded so forcefully. The official statement cited restructuring and new leadership to guide Grimaldi International into a responsible future. Stunned and humiliated, Nicholas packed his personal belongings from the CEO's office. Photographs, awards, and trinkets that once symbolized his success now felt like empty tokens. The staff members watched as he departed, some sympathetic, others relieved. Word spread like wildfire. The reign of Nicholas Grimaldi had ended. For a moment, Nicholas considered leaving Miami altogether. With his fortune significantly diminished by legal fees and collapsed stock, he was still wealthy but no longer the untouchable billionaire. He retreated to his penthouse, now hauntingly silent. Without the constant flurry of staff meetings and daily responsibilities, the emptiness pressed in on him. Haley visited him bringing groceries, something no one had ever done for him before. She found him sitting on the floor of the living room, documents spread around him. "I'm just sorting through my life," he said, with a sardonic smile. She knelt beside him, eyeing the stack of outdated contracts and shredded bank statements. "What do you plan to do now?" He shrugged, eyes distant. "I honestly have no idea. For years, my only identity was Billionaire CEO. Now that's gone." Haley placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You're still Nicholas. You still have the knowledge, the drive, and, believe it or not, a heart. You can use those to do something better this time." He looked up at her, a flicker of hope lighting his gaze. "I lost everything, Haley. Everyone has turned their back on me. Everyone except you." She inhaled deeply, her expression sad yet determined. "I won't pretend it's easy to watch everything fall apart. But maybe this is a chance for you to start over, unburdened by the corrupt pillars of your old empire. If you need a place to stay for a while, my couch is a bit lumpy, but it's yours." Nicholas almost laughed, a wave of gratitude surging through him. "You'd let me crash on your couch?" Haley gave him a playful nudge. "I'm not letting you on my couch indefinitely, but I can't let you wallow in this empty penthouse alone. Not when you're finally free to make real choices." Touched by her kindness, Nicholas considered the offer. He imagined the stark contrast, leaving a penthouse with marble floors for Haley's modest apartment in Little Havana. In that moment, he realized that the measure of his life was no longer the square footage of his living space or the height of the tower he resided in. It was the love and respect of the people he cared about and the integrity of his actions. With a resolute nod, Nicholas stood packing a small suitcase with a few essentials. "I need to do this," he whispered more to himself than to Haley. "It's time I learned what a real life looks like." Moving into Haley's modest apartment was a shock to Nicholas's system. Gone were the private chefs and personal assistants. Here he cooked spaghetti, clumsily washed dishes, and took out the trash. The living space was small, the furniture mismatched, and the air conditioner rattled when it ran at full blast. Yet for all its imperfections, the apartment was filled with warmth and authenticity. Early mornings found Haley preparing coffee in a chipped mug adorned with a cartoon turtle. Nicholas would stumble out of the makeshift bed, an old futon in the living room, still adjusting to the morning's quiet. He'd watch Haley feed her rescue cat Momo and exchange neighborly banter in Spanish with Mrs. Rodriguez next door. In the evenings, they walked through the vibrant streets of Little Havana, sampling Cuban pastries and listening to local musicians play on the sidewalk. Without his towering wealth as a buffer, Nicholas experienced the city on a more intimate level. Strangers greeted him not as Mr. Grimaldi, but simply as the tall man tagging along with Haley. During this time, Haley resumed her research at the lab. Nicholas, determined to reinvent himself, accepted an advisory role at a fledgling non-profit that aimed to provide clean water technology to impoverished communities in South America. The pay was minimal, but the work was fulfilling, and it aligned with Haley's values. Every day brought new lessons. In the lab, Nicola learned how to carefully handle fragile specimens without the insensitivity he once exhibited in his business dealings. Through field trips with Haley to coral nurseries, he witnessed the delicate balance of marine life. The wonder on Haley's face when she discovered thriving baby corals was infectious, and Nicholas found himself cheering right alongside her. Their relationship deepened, rooted now in genuine mutual respect rather than the magnetism of wealth. They navigated conflicts too. When Nicholas's old habits of control flared, Haley gently called him out. When Haley worried that his reforms might be a temporary phase, he had to reassure her by staying consistent. Yet the media hadn't forgotten him. Paparazzi occasionally lurked outside her apartment, snapping pictures of the once mighty billionaire now living humbly. Some tabloids wrote scathing articles mocking his downfall, labeling him the tycoon who traded a penthouse for poverty. Others hailed him as a reformed figure, though public skepticism ran high. One night, while they were watching a documentary on sea turtles, Nicholas received a phone call. It was Ingrid. Grimaldi International had officially completed the external audit, revealing major corruption and illegalities tied to Paolo Farnese's manipulations, and inevitably some of Nicholas's historical dealings. Although Nicholas had stepped down, the authorities still wanted to question him about his past role. "I'll cooperate," he told Ingrid, voice steady. "I have to. It's the right thing to do." Haley overheard and quietly placed a hand on his arm. "I'll be there with you," she said, softly. They traveled to the office of the federal investigators, bracing for a grilling that could last hours, days, even weeks. Nicholas spent long sessions detailing everything he knew, relinquishing any illusions of saving face. He told them how Paolo had orchestrated bribes, how certain government officials colluded for personal gain, and how he, Nicholas, had turned a blind eye to questionable deals for the sake of profits. It was cathartic, but it left him vulnerable to possible legal repercussions. At the end of the interrogation, one of the investigators, a stern woman named Agent Ruiz, gave him a measured look. "You've done the right thing here, Mr. Grimaldi," she said quietly. "Cooperating fully won't erase the consequences, but it might be taken into account." Outside the building, Haley slipped her hand into his. "No matter what happens next, I'm proud of you," she said. A swirl of relief, fear, and gratitude overwhelmed him. "I don't deserve you." She offered him a half-smile, eyes shining with empathy. "Love isn't about deserving. It's about growth and sincerity. Keep growing, Nicholas." The months that followed tested Nicholas in ways he never imagined. Legal proceedings moved slowly, but the once cruel billionaire now stood on the other side of the fence, no longer dictating terms, but adhering to a moral compass he'd discovered with Haley. He funded small conservation projects with what remained of his fortune, focusing on tangible results rather than flashy galas. Though many of the charges related to Paolo's activities fell on Paolo himself, Nicholas wasn't completely exonerated. He was fined heavily for negligence and had to appear before a judge who mandated community service, an ironic twist for a man once hailed as untouchable. But there was a sense of relief in accepting responsibility in paying his dues. During those community service hours, Nicholas worked with local youth groups, teaching them the basics of entrepreneurship, this time emphasizing ethics and sustainability. He heard the children's laughter and realized he was no longer haunted by the ghosts of unscrupulous deals. He was forging a path of atonement, one step at a time. Haley stood by him throughout her presence, an unwavering anchor. Their relationship thrived, not because of grand displays of wealth, but because of small acts of compassion. When Nicholas eventually found a modest condo, one he could afford after legal fees, Haley helped him decorate it with second-hand furniture and her own artwork. Gone were the marble floors and automated curtains, replaced by the warm glow of second-hand lamps and the laughter of genuine friends. One afternoon, as they strolled through a local farmer's market, hand in hand, Nicholas glimpsed a headline on a discarded newspaper. "From Billionaire to Simple Man, the Fall and Redemption of Nicholas Grimaldi." A pang of regret tugged at him, but Haley squeezed his hand reassuringly. "You didn't fail," she said softly, reading his thoughts. "You just discovered that success wasn't what you thought it was." He smiled, pulling her close. "I used to think I could buy anything or anyone, but I couldn't buy your soul, Haley. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me." She blushed, heart full. "I love you, Nicholas." He answered with a tenderness that once eluded him. "I love you too." In the end, Nicholas Grimaldi didn't regain his empire. He didn't need to. The man who once measured success by bank accounts learned to measure it in kindness, integrity, and respect for life. To the outside world, he might have been a fallen titan, a cautionary tale of greed. But to Haley and to the dolphins and reefs he now truly aimed to protect, he was simply a man who had finally discovered a better way. And that was worth more than all the billions in the world. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey into the life of Nicholas Grimaldi. A man who thought money could buy the world, but discovered it could never purchase a genuine heart. We watched him rise to unimaginable power, using people as pawns, and believing kindness was a luxury no one could afford. But in the end, it was the gentle spirit of Haley Parker that taught him a priceless truth. True wealth lies in empathy, integrity, and love. If you found yourself moved by this story of redemption, resilience, and the power of simplicity, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing it with friends who might need a reminder that change is possible, and subscribing to our channel for more stories that dive deep into the human experience. Your engagement helps us continue creating content that sparks hope and inspires us all to strive for better. Thank you, all.